Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Dang it anyhow. So I always have to say that without thinking, because the second I start thinking of it, I screw it up. But that is our goal, is to cut through the BS that's out there in the world and just try to give you guys the truth on these things. And speaking of truth, we're going to be talking today in regards to nutrition about fact or fiction. So, the idea of today's podcast is to raise awareness amongst the things that we believe we are doing and kind of open up our perception on this a little bit. And ask yourself, am I acting on factual knowledge? Or do I just kind of believe this to be true, but I don't actually know if it's true? So, I recently had people kind of make two comments to me, and this kind of sparked the idea for the podcast. And the one was, the person said, I didn't eat the bun so I could have the fries. So we've all been there. So we went out to eat, and we're kind of feeling guilty, or trying to do it quote-unquote healthy. And we're like, you know what, how can I eat out and not screw up my diet? So we make concessions. So sometimes people get a chicken sandwich versus a burger. And then a person like this, or like we all know the famous example of a Big Mac and a Diet Coke. So as if the Diet Coke was really going to save that meal. So from the Big Mac. Now the other comment, like I said, was in regards to this, was the person skipped the hamburger bun, which they believe to be carbs. So that way they could have their French fries, which they believe to be carbs. And the idea behind this is innocent, and there is some truth to it, is if you were going to have the fries anyhow, skipping the calories of the bun was good to just kind of reduce some calories from the meal. But the people often make these statements in the sense of believing them to be equal in the trade. So, for example, is I give you $5, you give me back $5. So they'll say, I didn't eat the bun so I can have the fries. That is absolutely not an equal trade, by the way. So a typical hamburger bun has about 120 calories. A typical serving of French fries at a restaurant is over 300 calories. And even small fries from McDonald's, I believe, are 250-ish, something like that, calories. So think about big home fries from a restaurant. You could be looking at 400, 500, even 600 calories, especially depending on the type of oils and whatever else is on it. So I went to a restaurant recently, and they had these garlic butter and something else. There was something else on the fries, and that was probably 800 calorie quote-unquote side dish to their already 800 calorie to 1,000 calorie actual meal. So when we look at the data of that, so when we look at the factual data, how many calories is in each item, we recognize that it is absolutely not a fair trade. Now, like I said, if we want to look at this in the kind of happy, let's look at the positive things of life. It was true that skipping out on the 120 calories of the bun now means that whole meal is now 120 calories less. That's a quote-unquote good thing. But we need to look at the big picture. It's typically a hamburger and French fries meal from a restaurant. You're looking at probably 1,000 calories. So maybe 800 to be on the super nice conservative side of the guess. So if I cut 100 calories out of an 800 calorie meal, yes, that's 100 calories less, but that's still 700 calories. And for a lot of people, most females, depending on their activity levels and blah, 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 700 calories can represent actually over a third of your day. And you're getting that in a single meal. And like I said, 800 calories is a very conservative guess. So you're probably looking at more like 1,000. So sometimes people could be having half their daily value just in that one meal. So if you cut out 100 calories or not, doesn't really make that big of a difference. So is it a difference? Yes. Should you do it if you're going to have the fries anyhow and you don't care that much about the bun? Yes, make that trade. But the key here that we want to recognize for this podcast was the person was making the statement thinking they were an even trade. But they're not. So they had the belief of what they were doing, but then there's the facts of what they were doing. And those two didn't line up. So another example we have is somebody told me recently, I gave up carbs at lunch so I could have some wine at night. Now, those are actually relatively probably going to be equal in terms of caloric exchange. And I'm taking a big fat liberty at guessing of what kind of carbs they would have been having at lunch versus how much wine they're going to end up drinking at night. So let's just assume that the calories are about the same. But what isn't the same is when they were having those calories. So what ended up happening was, in that example, is they were giving up carbs at lunch so they could have carbs at night. And the wine would represent carbs because the wine's sugar. So what ends up happening is that they end up under-eating during the day and then overeating at night. And that becomes kind of the trouble of this. So the calories might be the same, but when they have the calories weren't. So the under-eating during the day can actually lead to more cravings, and it can lead to overeating at night. And it also causes like a stress response during our day. So if I'm underfed during the day, my body produces more stress hormones like cortisol, and I had kind of run off the energy of stress throughout the day. And then that can lead to like sleeping issues, that can lead to us feeling fatigued and mentally tired, and we just kind of don't operate well. So it's kind of like if you were trying to run a machine when it was out of fuel. That's not going to go well. So if the machine could still move at all, it would not be functioning very well. So it would be very poor quality. There'd be a lot of stress to the whole system. So kind of like, let's think about it, the machine being fueled, but maybe it doesn't have any grease. So it doesn't have anything to make things go smoothly. There's a lot of wear and tear, there's a lot of stress in the machine in that situation. So yes, they were saving calories during the day, but those saving calories, quote unquote, during the day would have led to like more intense cravings, would have led to overeating, would have led to the cortisol response, which maybe leads to poor sleep. So there's cascading negative effects from that. Then also overeating at night, so having too many of the calories at night. What happens then is you're having excessive calories at one time, more than what your body's going to need. So some of that gets converted over to body fat. And then also excessive sugar intake can lead to blood glucose issues. It can lead to cholesterol issues. It can lead to triglyceride issues. So if somebody already doesn't have very healthy blood work, and they already have other compounding effects like being overweight or inactive, man, that's a big bummer of what they're doing. So if they're looking at it in the narrow scope of calories, they think they're doing a good job. But when you look at the broad picture of what's really happening, there's a lot of cascading negative effects from that choice. From skipping carbs at lunch, she could have carbs at night. So it seems innocent, but it is absolutely not. So that's what we want to look at when we kind of consider our nutritional choices, and we're looking at this idea of fact or fiction. Is just because I believe something to be true, or just because something kind of sounds good, that doesn't mean that it actually is true. And it doesn't mean that you're immune to the real factual consequences of your choices. So if the person was giving up carbs at lunch, they could have wine at night, they're going to kind of be a little annoyed and bummed in the middle of the day that they didn't get the food that they really wanted at lunch. Because they didn't have the carbs. They're going to kind of feel a little bit of that stress throughout the rest of the day, feel a little bit tired. They're going to have their dinner, and then they're going to get to have their wine. But usually by then, they've already kind of had these negative effects during the day. They were kind of slumpy and tired during the day. Maybe they were kind of mentally fatigued. They weren't as productive as they wanted to be. So all of a sudden, they come into that wine, and they're not coming into it in a healthy, happy manner. So they're going to have the wine, but they're still going to feel bummed about the whole how the day went. So therefore, what ends up happening was that wine wasn't even really enjoyable. It didn't even have the positive effect for equivalent to the negative health effect. So they didn't get what they wanted from it. And that makes it even more bad because you had the bad consequences and you didn't even get like an emotional or mental benefit from it or a boost from it. So there's a quote that says the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that same thing is true with our health. So poor health, the road to poor health is paved with good intentions. Meaning that it's people intended to do things well, or they believed what they were doing was well, but it factually wasn't. And that's where they're actually going to cause problems. That's where the poor health comes in. So it's not what you intended to do, it's what you actually did. and in the sense of what those actual results are from your actual actions. So that's why it's really important that when we make nutrition decisions, that we know the factual basis for our choices. We have to know if what we're doing is absolutely true, and we have to know how it relates to the bigger picture. So our first quote, I didn't eat the bun so I could have the fries, that was not factually true. That was not an even trade-off. Sorry for all the dings. Somebody sending me a bunch of videos and stuff. But anyhow, so that wasn't factually true what they thought they were doing. They thought they were making even trade, bun for fries, but it's not true. So they would have overate their calories at that meal. They would wonder why then, man, I'm dieting, but I can't seem to lose weight. You're not dieting, you're just choosing not to eat a bun and instead eating something way worse. So that's like me giving up a piece of pizza so I can have a whole cheesecake. It is not an equivalent choice. So you're going to feel like you're making a healthy, good for you decision, and you're going to be like, man, I had the discipline to say no to that bun. But you're still going to gain weight because your calories are still higher. So eating out all the time, even if you quote unquote eat healthy things, is still more calories than if you were to prepare the stuff yourself. So that's a big effect. So I have a ton of people all the time who bitch and whine and say how they can't get results. They're like, diets just don't work for me. But yet you're eating out once or twice a week. You don't pay attention half the time what you're doing. You only restrict yourself in moments where it's the easiest restriction possible. Then you think just because you restricted yourself in one meal, it makes you immune to the entire rest of the day of horrible decisions. No, that's not how it works. And clearly the fact you're not getting results means that's not how it works. So a lot of times people kind of overvalue what they do and they undervalue what they're not doing. So in the sense of, I ate a good breakfast, therefore my whole day should be good. Even though I ate out with friends for lunch, I kind of overate at night and had a treat before I went to bed. But I had that good breakfast. Whoop-de-doo. So you made 10% of a good choice and 90% of bad. That 10% doesn't make up for the 90. So that's the idea we want to look at here, is what I'm doing true, and is what I'm doing not only factually true in the moment, but is it true in the bigger picture? Okay? So, some things that I use, or some little tips here we can think of, is if you want to learn more about what is in your food, so that way you can actually know if trading a bun for fries is a smart choice, you have to look that stuff up. Okay? So you can't just think, I traded a carb for a carb. How much of each one? What's the value of each one? What's the timing of each one? So like we said, the carbs at lunch versus the wine at night. That might be an even trade in calories, but it's not an even trade in effects. So your overall health effect from that, what is that? So one of the nutrition databases that I use is www.nutritiondata.com. I like that one because it has a lot of factual information and it has an entire huge library of meals and food items and stuff. So you can look up actual food items from restaurants and see the nutritional values. So you can see how many calories, how many grams of fats, grams of carbs, grams of protein. So stuff like that. So understanding the bigger picture is even true. So I have a lot of times people tell me is like, we switched from white rice to brown rice. Okay, what did that change? Did it change your calories? Did it change how many grams of carbs you're having a day? What was the positive change of that? So yes, we believe brown rice to be healthier than white rice, but what is the other stuff around that? What's the bigger picture? So we did a podcast number 41 in the past called Diet Right, What Matters Most, and we talk about the components of a diet. So what's all involved? There's calories, there's grams of carbs versus fats versus proteins. There's meal timing, there's meal quality. Am I having Oreos or am I having sweet potatoes? So what's my carb source? What's the quality of my fats? What's the quality of my protein? So all of that stuff is important, but not all of it is equal. So there are certain things that are they're meaningful and they have some value, but they're a small picture thing compared to the big picture. So podcast 41, Diet Right, What Matters Most, that explains the bigger picture, what are the most important components. So if you're going to take any effort whatsoever, it tells you which one you could start with and which ones are the least likely to kind of make a big effect, so you don't want to put big effort there. So go listen to that. Okay? Now, if you're ever uncertain if what you're doing is true, if it's false, if it's fact or fiction, you have to go look that up. Go get some data. Go get some facts. Okay? So like we said, you can go to nutritiondata.com or other databases and see what they say, see if what the facts are. Like, for example, something I get asked all the time is people ask, like, how much protein they should have. Or they'll say, like, I had such and such for lunch. That had protein in it. It had 6 grams of protein. Whoop-de-freaking-do. So 6 grams of protein makes a difference to a bird, maybe, but not to a human being. So in podcast 33, we discuss how much protein you should have in a day, and we discuss actual concrete numbers. We discuss why those numbers are like factual or true. We learn what protein does in our body. We learn the facts about it. So other than us just saying, oh, this thing had protein in it, okay, but was it enough? Was it the right amount? Was it too much? Like, was it the right timing? Like, there's a lot more to it than just, oh, it had protein in it. So let's look at what we're doing, and let's think to ourselves, is what I'm doing, is it fact-based or is it belief-based? So do I just believe it to be true, or do I actually know if it's true? Okay? So a more jokey way of saying this is you don't want to be full of shit, you want to know your shit. So when you make a statement such as I'm doing this because, like, I'm trading this for this, or I'm doing this to get this effect, we have to know if that's true. Just because we believe it to be true doesn't mean we get results. Okay? You can't believe something into being true. It has to actually be true or not true. Okay? So right now, think of the decisions you make in regards to your nutrition. Do you actually know that your decisions are true? Or do you just believe them to be true? Okay? Really take a look at that. And you can take a look at this kind of in all areas of your life. Do you know what you know? Or do you just believe that what you know is true? So do you actually know the facts? So I think we all know that one person in life who seems to be an expert on everything. You ask them a question, or if you're having a story with somebody else, they chime in with their quote-unquote expertise. And they seem to just be so well-informed and so experienced with everything. When in actuality, they've read maybe one article of all subjects, or they have a very, basic understanding of it. They've read one or two things, they maybe had some small experience that they're overblowing in their mind, and now they think they're a freaking expert. But when you talk to them, and if you actually are an expert, so I know this in the sense of like nutrition and training, is I've done a lot of trainer education over the years where I work with different organizations and different people and try to work with trainers to educate them not only on kind of like the nuances of training, but also just business and even things like body language, the volume in which you speak to your client, all that stuff kind of comes into play. And often whenever I go do events like that, like I went to an event recently, and we were kind of standing around waiting for it to start, and the person who I was talking, well, the person talked to me basically, they didn't know that I was going to be a speaker. So they started telling me about all these things they do in the gym, and like how they're the strongest person that they know, and nobody else works as hard as they do, and blah, 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 blah. So it was like 20 minutes of somebody just talking at me, and they believed themselves to be an expert, but they were an idiot. So nothing they were really saying was absolutely true. It's just ridiculous. It's out of what they were exposed to, they knew more than most people around them, but they absolutely did not know everything. And I still need to learn more too, so I'm not trying to say I'm an expert, but I definitely knew more than that person, and I knew enough to know that they didn't know what they were doing. So God help whoever they give advice to. But that happens all the time, is people get a little bit of data, and man, is that dangerous sometimes. So I talk to clients, and I train a lot of personal trainers, and they'll jokingly say sometimes that they know enough to get in trouble. Or they know enough to be dangerous. And what that means is, in the scope of like what we can learn over time on a subject, is there's kind of like, at first you learn like some information, and you think you're a freaking genius, you think you're an expert. As you continue to learn more, you realize, holy crap, there is even way more to learn here than I ever realized. So you go from thinking you're an expert to thinking you're an idiot. And then as you continue to learn more, you start to simplify all the information that's out there. And at the end, you kind of know all the stuff that was involved, but you know the finer details and the more succinct way of saying things. So it's kind of like post-complexity simplicity is the terminology for it. Is after all the complexity of the thing, you've worked your way through that, you've refined it, and now you know the simple truths. So that's kind of where we want to get to, is we want to know the simple truths about what we're doing in regards to nutrition or just life in general. So at first, we learn a few things, we think we know everything, we think everything we're doing is right. As you continue to learn more, you'll realize that there's more nuances to it than what you really knew at first. So you don't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know it. So once you start knowing that you don't know it all, that really opens up your mind to learning in its truest form, is where you're always learning, always refining, always simplifying. So that's what we want to do, is we want to think to ourselves is, am I full of shit or do I know my shit? So if I know a little bit, if like you're new to something or you've just learned something, you want to recognize, no matter how appealing it might be to think that you're a genius now, if it's new to you, you probably have a lot more to go. So a lot more to learn. So I've been personal training now for 17 years. So I've been helping people with nutrition for 17 years. And I'm still learning everything, like learning new things all the time. So it's something that just never ends. So you have to always stay humble and control your knowledge and what's getting thrown at you by always questioning, is this true? Is this factually true? So I've read so many things over the years where nutrition fads came up and people were jumped on this diet, jumped on that diet. And what do you know? It all boiled down to the same stupid shit that we knew beforehand. So you need to eat healthy foods. You need to eat often throughout the day if you're more active during the day. You just need to control your excess. So it's really just kind of the basic things turn out to always be true. So all these new diets, all they do is they create rules, black and white rules, that you can kind of do right or wrong on the basic rules of nutrition. But the problem is that often those simplified rules they're not applicable to real life. So real life is messy. Real life has changes and varieties to it. Like every day something's a little bit different. So if you learn these black and white rules, these right or wrong rules, you're always going to be either right or wrong. Whereas if you learn the nuances of things, you can learn how to modify what you do throughout the day to always be kind of like closer to correct, closer to right. So it's very important that we learn facts, because then once you know the facts, you can learn how to manipulate that and change that to whatever your needs are. Okay? So the idea of this podcast was just to raise our awareness that if we believe something to be true, we have to ask ourselves, do I know this for a fact? Do I absolutely know that this is true? And if you don't have like something to point back to and go, oh, I know this is true because of this. If you don't have that, you have to go find it. Okay? So sometimes our factual knowledge can be actual formal data. So we looked up a study, we learned it from some kind of formal educated thing. Or it could be experience. So maybe you've done something, before 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden you realized, hey, you know what? That way hasn't worked yet. Let me try this way. Then all of a sudden that way works. You're like, ooh, okay. You try it again. It works again. Maybe you get a friend to try it. Maybe it works for them. Maybe you get another person to try it. It works for them. Then all of a sudden it becomes kind of more of a true thing than just a believed thing. Okay? So formal data and even experience. Especially when the experience is repeated from other people or even multiple times in your life. So a one-off time doesn't really give you fact, but a repetitive thing turning out to be true each time gives you more of a fact. So those can be facts for us. That can be what we know, like the belief that we have, like the thing that proves something to be true versus a belief. It can be formal data or even like repeatable experience. So that's our goal, okay? Our goal is to know for a fact if what we're doing is correct. In the bigger picture and in the micro picture. So like the big details and small details. Is this actually true? Does it just sound good and I'm hoping it's true? Or do I actually know it's true? So make sure you live off of as many actual knowing that it's true things. And try to avoid just kind of telling yourself these self-soothing lies. Okay? And falling into these beliefs that are not factually based. Okay? So, let's go back to that. If you're trading your bun for French fries, recognize that that's not an even trade. So you're saving some calories by doing that, sure. But does the negating of the bun equal you can eat as many fries as you want? Hell no. Okay? And then also, if you give up carbs at lunch, it does not mean that you can have carbs at night. Okay? So when you have your carbs is important, not only just an equal amount of them, but the timing of them is important. Okay? So make sure everything else you're doing in your nutrition is backed up by fact. Cool? Okay, if you have any other beliefs that you think you do, or common ones that you've heard, shoot us an email, brutalirongym@gmail.com. I think it'd just be fun to hear different ones, and maybe make some more podcasts about these topics. I think it's fun for people to hear the myths of nutrition, and for us to learn the science-ish stuff on breaking it down and what's true and what's not true. So if there's any other kind of like false statements you hear all the time, shoot me an email, share them with me, and we'll make a podcast about it, okay? So if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people you help, the happier the world will be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we would love, love, love to hear from you. So this podcast is for you, so we know what you want to learn about. And you can reach us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.